I had spent months planning the most exquisite bridal shower and bachelorette getaway for my fiancé's sister, Emma. I wasn't just a future sister-in-law. I had become one of her closest confidants, or so I thought. Living in Boston with my fiancé, James, I'd grown close to Emma over weekly coffee meetups and shopping trips to Newbury Street. We'd text each other memes at midnight and share secrets that even James wasn't privy to. When she got engaged to Christopher last fall, her excitement was contagious, and I immediately volunteered to handle her pre-wedding celebrations. I paid for everything: the hotel suite at the Ritz, the private boat dinner on the Seine, even the personalized gold-accented invitations with little Eiffel Tower charms that cost a small fortune to ship from that boutique stationery store in Cambridge. I wanted her to feel like royalty in Paris. The Pinterest board we created together had over 200 pins of French patisseries and sunset photoshoot locations. It wasn't just about generosity. I genuinely wanted to be part of her joy. But the tension with my future mother-in-law, Margaret, had always simmered just beneath the surface of our family gatherings. A Boston socialite with connections to half the law firms in the city, Margaret carried herself with the confident air of someone who was used to getting her way. She never openly insulted me, but she didn't need to. Her constant backhanded compliments about my quaint apartment or my interesting career choice as a graphic designer made her feelings toward me perfectly clear. At Thanksgiving dinner last year, she'd spent 20 minutes discussing how James's ex-girlfriend came from such good stock, all while passing me the cranberry sauce with a tight smile. Still, I had always hoped that my involvement in her daughter's wedding would thaw whatever cold walls stood between us. I threw myself into planning, spending hours comparing French champagne brands and researching the most Instagram-worthy spots in Montmartre. I even took French lessons on Tuesday evenings at the community college, wanting to navigate Paris like a local for Emma's sake. "You're going above and beyond, Olivia," James would say, kissing my forehead as I stayed up late addressing envelopes. "Mom will finally see how amazing you are." But Margaret's approval remained elusive. At Emma's engagement party at the Beacon Hill Country Club, she'd introduced me to her friends as James's current girlfriend, despite our 2-year engagement. When I showed her the Paris itinerary I'd created, she merely glanced at it and said, "Well, I suppose it's nice enough for what you could afford." Then came the call on a rainy April afternoon. I was at my favorite coffee shop on Commonwealth Avenue, finalizing details with the French tour guide I'd hired, when my phone lit up with Margaret's name. Unusual, since she typically communicated with me through James or Emma. "Hello, Margaret," I answered, trying to keep my voice bright and pleasant. Her voice was coated in sugary disdain as she said, "Olivia, dear, after much consideration, we've decided that you're not welcome at my daughter's wedding." My heart stopped. The coffee shop noise faded into the background. I thought I'd misheard her. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "I think you heard me perfectly well. The family has discussed it, and we feel your presence would be disruptive. Emma deserves a perfect day without any awkwardness." No explanation. No empathy. Just a flat decision wrapped in a condescending smile I could hear through the phone. The barista called out someone's order, startling me back to reality. Outside, people hurried past with umbrellas, living normal lives while mine suddenly tilted on its axis. "Margaret, I don't understand. Did something happen? Did I do something wrong?" My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. "Let's not make this more dramatic than it needs to be. These things happen. Sometimes people just don't fit, and it's better to recognize that early on." Her tone suggested she was doing me a favor. I stood in stunned silence before answering a quiet, "All right." I didn't beg. I didn't question further. I simply ended the call. The rain had intensified when I stepped outside, but I barely noticed as I walked the 15 blocks home. My mind raced with questions. Had Emma agreed to this? What about James? Did everyone know except me? The weight of public humiliation pressed down on my shoulders alongside the rain. By the time I reached our brownstone apartment, my clothes were soaked through, but the chill I felt came from somewhere deeper. James wasn't home. He was at a client dinner in the financial district. I stood dripping in our entryway, staring at the framed photo of all of us at Christmas. Emma and I had our arms around each other, laughing at some forgotten joke. Margaret stood slightly apart, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I peeled off my wet clothes and took a scalding shower, hoping the hot water would wash away the sting of rejection. It didn't. Instead, I found myself thinking about the hundreds of hours I'd invested in making Emma's dream come true, the thousands of dollars I'd spent from my savings, the genuine love I thought I was building with my future family. As I toweled off, my phone pinged with a text from Emma. "Hey, just checking if you confirmed the champagne tasting for Paris. So excited." She had no idea what her mother had done. I left it unanswered and crawled into bed, pulling the duvet over my head as if I could hide from what had just happened. I didn't cry. I was too shocked for tears. Instead, I lay there listening to the rain against the window, wondering how I had misread everything so completely. That night, I stared at the itinerary I had created with so much care. Paris in May. The city would be bursting with chestnut, blossoms and the soft golden light that inspired countless artists. I'd booked a private suite at Le Meurice overlooking the Tuileries garden. I'd arranged for a personal shopper to take Emma and her bridesmaids through the boutiques of Saint-Germain-des-Prés, 5-star restaurants with impossibly hard-to-get reservations, custom spa treatments at the city's most exclusive addresses, a private sunset cruise on the Seine with a Michelin-starred chef preparing dinner on board. Everything had been confirmed and prepaid. All of it, a gift for a family that now openly rejected me. My laptop screen glowed in the darkened bedroom, casting shadows across the wall. My finger hovered over the cancel button longer than it should have. I'd never been vindictive. Never been one to let emotions override logic. But this wasn't about revenge. This was about self-respect. James called around midnight. I could hear the ambient noise of the restaurant in the background. "Hey babe, just checking in. You okay?" His voice was light, untroubled. "Did you know?" I asked quietly. "Know what?" "Your mother called me today. She told me I'm not welcome at Emma's wedding." The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. He hadn't known, but he wasn't entirely surprised either. "Liv, that's ridiculous. She can't just decide that. I'll talk to her tomorrow." "You don't sound shocked," I said. He sighed. "Mom's been difficult lately. She and Emma have been arguing about the wedding details. I think she's just lashing out." "At me? Why am I the target?" "You know how she is. She's probably jealous that Emma's gotten so close to you." His explanation sounded hollow, even to him. "Don't worry. I'll fix it. We'll figure it out tomorrow, okay?" After we hung up, I sat in the stillness of our apartment. The clock on the nightstand read 12:47. In Paris, it would be early morning. The vendors I'd hired would be starting their day, preparing for a bachelorette party that suddenly felt pointless. I opened my banking app. The transfers to the Paris hotels, restaurants, and services appeared as a series of large withdrawals. $5,000, give or take. Not a small sum for a graphic designer's salary. I'd been saving for this since Emma got engaged, wanting everything to be perfect. But then I did it, without a word, without a grudge. I simply reversed the transaction. A few clicks, a confirmation code sent to my phone, and it was done. I also called the travel agent's 24-hour line and canceled the Paris trip. The agent sounded sleepy, but professional as she processed my request. "There will be some cancellation fees, Ms. Parker," she warned. "That's fine," I replied. "Please process it anyway." Would you like to leave a message for the rest of the party? They'll be notified of the cancellation. No message, I said. Thank you. No tears, just quiet resolution. The $5,000 returned to my account felt like poetic justice. Not revenge, just balance. I hadn't done anything out of obligation. I had organized the trip because I genuinely cared about Emma, about becoming part of this family. But being rejected so harshly made me realize that I didn't need to fund the dreams of people who didn't respect me. I closed my laptop and placed it on the nightstand. Our apartment felt different somehow, as if the space had expanded now that it wasn't filled with wedding plans and desperate attempts to win approval. I walked to the kitchen and made a cup of chamomile tea, something I hadn't done in weeks due to the constant wedding planning. The living room window offered a view of the Boston skyline, lights twinkling against the night sky. I curled up on the window seat, cradling my mug and watching a late-night water taxi cross the harbor. For the first time in months, I went to bed with no plans to impress anyone. I felt a strange freedom in my chest. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I felt clear. If they didn't want me as part of the family, I wouldn't keep investing myself like I already was. Sleep came, easier than expected. I didn't dream of wedding disasters or family confrontations. Instead, I dreamt of walking alone through Paris streets, taking photographs of architectural details, and eating pastries whenever I felt like it. No schedule. No expectations. Just freedom. When James came home, I pretended to be asleep. I felt him slide into bed beside me, felt his hesitation before he placed an arm around my waist. In the darkness, I could sense his confusion, his desire to fix things without confrontation. James had always been the peacekeeper in his family, smoothing ruffled feathers and translating Margaret's barbs into something less painful. I loved him for it. But tonight, I needed the clarity of my own decision. Morning arrived with soft spring light filtering through the curtains. James had already left for his 7 a.m. meeting downtown. He'd left a note on his pillow. "We'll sort this out. I love you. Jay." I made coffee and toast, then carried my breakfast to the small balcony overlooking the street. Below, a young couple walked hand in hand, stopping to look at the window display of the bookshop on the corner. They seemed happy, untroubled. I wondered if they knew yet how family could complicate love, how approval could become currency in relationships. My phone lay silent on the kitchen counter. I hadn't checked it since last night, hadn't looked at Emma's text or any others that might have come through. For once, I wasn't rushing to respond, wasn't crafting the perfect message to keep everyone happy. The silence felt earned, deserved. After breakfast, I showered and dressed for work. I had a client meeting at 10, a local restaurant wanting to rebrand, and for the first time in months, my mind was fully present for the task at hand. No wedding details crowded my thoughts, no need to check my phone for updates from vendors in Paris. As I gathered my portfolio and keys, I finally glanced at my phone. The screen was blank, no new notifications. The universe continued spinning without my constant attention. I slipped the phone into my bag and left the apartment, locking the door behind me. The spring air felt fresh against my face as I walked to the tea station. Cherry blossoms lined Commonwealth Avenue, petals drifting in the light breeze. I'd always loved Boston in spring, the way the whole city seemed to exhale after the long winter. Today, it felt like I was experiencing it for the first time in months, present in my own life, instead of orchestrating someone else's. The following morning, I awoke to a vibrating phone. It had started buzzing so insistently that it nearly vibrated itself off my nightstand. 35 missed calls, all from Margaret and Emma. The time read 7:23 a.m., and I briefly wondered if something had happened to James. Texts flooded in, one after another. "Please call me. You misunderstood. Can we talk? Olivia, This is important. Call me back immediately." My curiosity was piqued, but not enough to call back immediately. Instead, I made my way to the kitchen, brewed a strong cup of French, press coffee, ironic given the circumstances, and watched the chaos unfold quietly from my screen. Another text came through from Emma. "What's going on with the Paris trip? The hotel just called me." So that was it. The cancellations had started to register. I sipped my coffee by the window, watching a pair of cardinals flit between the branches of the maple tree outside. Their bright red feathers stood out against the green leaves, nature's own little drama playing out while human drama pinged on my phone. James called next. "Liv, what's happening? Mom and Emma are freaking out. Something about Paris being canceled?" "Yes," I said simply. "I canceled it last night." "The whole trip? Why would you do that?" His voice held more surprise than anger. "Your mother made it clear I wasn't welcome in the family. I didn't see the point in funding a trip I wasn't allowed to attend." "Olivia, we could have talked about this. Mom doesn't speak for all of us." "But she spoke for enough of you, didn't she?" The words came out softer than I intended. "Look, James, I'm not angry. I just made a decision that felt right for me." Emma's devastated. She had no idea about what Mom said to you. "I find that hard to believe," I replied, though a small part of me wondered if Emma truly had been kept in the dark. After we hung up, I checked my emails. The travel agent had sent confirmation of all the cancellations. The hotel in Paris had followed up with a polite message expressing regret about the change in plans. Life continued to unfold in an orderly fashion, despite the chaos I'd supposedly created. It wasn't until a long message came in that my breath caught. It wasn't just from Emma. It was a voice note, nearly 2 minutes long. I hesitated before pressing play. "Olivia, it's Emma." Her voice was thick with tears. "The venue in Paris just called to confirm that the bachelorette trip was canceled. They said all the reservations were gone. The boat dinner, the spa day, everything. The catering service said something about cancellation fees. It's all falling apart, and I don't understand what's happening." A pause then. "Mom just told me what she did. That she called you and said you weren't welcome at the wedding. I swear to God, Olivia, I didn't know. I never would have let her do that. You're like a sister to me." Another pause, longer this time. I could hear her trying to compose herself. "I didn't know you were the one funding the Paris trip. Mom told me it was a gift from her and Dad. I had no idea you were paying for everything. Please, can we meet? Can we talk about this? I'm so sorry." The message ended with something I hadn't expected. "I love you. Please don't let my mom ruin our friendship." I sat back, my coffee growing cold in my hands. Suddenly, I wasn't just the woman who had been uninvited. I was the one who had been making the dream wedding happen behind the scenes. The one who had been taking credit for my generosity was the same woman who had decided I wasn't good enough for her family. My phone rang again. This time it was Claire, Emma's maid of honor and my occasional brunch companion. "Olivia, what the hell is going on?" Claire's voice was a mix of confusion and irritation. "Emma's having a meltdown, and the girls' group chat is blowing up about Paris being canceled. It's a long story," I said. "Well, I've got time. Emma said something about her mom uninviting you to the wedding, and you were the one who planned the whole Paris thing? I'm so confused." I gave her the abbreviated version, keeping my tone neutral. Claire's gasps and exclamations provided enough emotion for both of us. "That's insane," she finally said. "We all thought Margaret was handling the bachelorette planning. She kept taking credit for it at the bridesmaids' luncheon last month." "That doesn't surprise me," I replied. "So what now? The girls are freaking out. We've all taken time off work. bought new outfits. Melissa even got her passport expedited. "I'm sorry about that," I said, and I meant it. The bridesmaids weren't to blame for Margaret's actions. But I'm not comfortable funding a trip for a wedding I've been explicitly told not to attend. God, this is such a mess, Claire sighed. For what it's worth, I think what Margaret did was horrible. You've been nothing but generous and kind. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, trying to process the morning's revelations. Emma hadn't known. The bridesmaids hadn't known. Even James had seemed genuinely surprised by his mother's actions. I wondered how many other lies Margaret had told, how many other relationships she had manipulated. My phone buzzed with another text from Emma. "I'm coming over. Please be home. Need to talk to you." I texted back a simple, "Okay," and went to shower. As the hot water washed over me, I tried to sort through my feelings. The anger had faded, replaced by something more complex. I wasn't sure if I felt vindicated or just sad that things had come to this. By the time the doorbell rang, I was dressed and mentally prepared. I opened the door to find Emma standing there, her eyes red and puffy, still in what looked like pajama pants and a Harvard sweatshirt, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice small. I stepped aside to let her enter. She looked around the apartment as if seeing it for the first time, though she'd been here countless times for movie nights and impromptu dinners. "I brought coffee," she said, holding up a cardboard tray with 2 cups from our favorite local shop. "Caramel latte with almond milk, extra shot." "Thanks," I said, taking the cup. The familiar gesture felt both comforting and strange in the context of our current situation. We sat at my small dining table, the morning light casting patterns on the wood through the blinds. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "I didn't know," Emma finally said, her voice cracking. "About what Mom said to you. About the Paris trip being your gift. About any of it." "Your mother has been taking credit for my contributions," I said. "That doesn't surprise me. But uninviting me to your wedding? That was unexpected." "It's not my wedding anymore," Emma said, tears welling in her eyes. "It's become this production that Mom's directing. Every time I want something, she overrules me. The venue, the flowers, the guest list, and now this." She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "I never would have let her uninvite you. You know that, right? You're going to be my sister." I wanted to believe her. Part of me did. But another part wondered how she could have been so oblivious to her mother's manipulations. "Why would she do this?" I asked. "What have I ever done to her?" Emma sighed deeply. "It's not about you, not really. It's about control. Mom's always been like this, but it's gotten worse since the engagement. She sees Christopher's family as these perfect Boston Brahmins, and she's desperate to impress them. She's been trying to erase anything that doesn't fit her ideal image. And I don't fit that image? Nobody does, not even me, half the time." Emma squeezed my hand. "Please don't punish everyone because my mother is terrible. The girls are devastated about Paris, and I can't imagine getting married without you. There." I took a sip of my coffee, letting the warmth and sweetness settle in my chest. "I'm not trying to punish anyone. I just reached my limit with being used and discarded." "I understand that. I do." Emma's eyes were earnest. "But can we find a way forward? Can we salvage this?" Word spread fast. By that afternoon, the wedding group chat exploded. I wasn't part of it anymore. Margaret had removed me weeks ago, claiming it was just for the wedding party. But Claire kept me updated with screenshots. "I can't believe Paris is canceled," wrote Melissa, Emma's college roommate. "Did anyone else get a call from the hotel saying our reservation was gone?" That was from Rebecca, Christopher's sister. Emma, what's going on? We've all taken time off work, wrote Danielle, punctuating her message with angry face emojis. Then came Emma's response. I just found out my mom told Olivia she wasn't welcome at the wedding. Olivia was the one who planned and paid for the entire Paris trip, not my mom, like we all thought. The chat fell silent for a few minutes before exploding again with messages of shock and support. For me, surprisingly, not for Emma or Margaret. That's horrible. Olivia has been at every dress fitting, every cake tasting. Your mom told us she was handling all the Paris arrangements. She even showed us the itinerary like it was her idea. No wonder Olivia canceled everything. I would have too. Some of Emma's friends who had been excited for the Paris trip were now angry. At the bride, at her mother, and at how things had been handled. Screenshots of messages were shared across friend groups, and the story changed from me being the cold, disinterested fiancé to the woman who had quietly shouldered most of the expenses and still been discarded like an afterthought. I sat, in my favorite coffee shop on Boylston Street, watching the fallout unfold on my phone while trying to focus on a client project. The barista Ryan, who knew me by name and order, noticed my distraction. Rough day? He asked, bringing me a refill I hadn't ordered. Family drama, I replied with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. The worst kind. He nodded sympathetically. This one's on the house. My phone buzzed again. James was calling. I stepped outside to take it. Liv, have you seen the group chat? His voice was tight with stress. I'm not in it anymore, remember? But yes, I've seen some of it. It's a disaster. Mom's freaking out. Emma's crying. Christopher's family is asking questions about what kind of people they're marrying into. He sounded exhausted. I had no idea how much you were doing behind the scenes. Would it have mattered if you did? I asked quietly. The pause before. He answered, told me everything. I should have paid more attention, he finally said. I'm sorry, Liv. Really sorry. As I walked back to my apartment, my phone continued to buzz with notifications. People I barely knew were reaching out. Distant cousins of James, friends of Emma's I'd met once at a Christmas party, even Christopher's aunt who had complimented my earrings at the engagement dinner. My fiancé was mortified. He had no idea, either. He tried to fix things, calling Emma, then his mother, then me again. But it was already out in the open. My mother-in-law's version of the story began crumbling, and for the first time, she faced public backlash from her own family. Cousins and aunts began reaching out to me with apologies, saying they had never known how involved I had been. Olivia, this is Barbara, James's aunt, read one message. I just heard what happened. I always thought Margaret was handling the Paris arrangements. I had no idea you were the one behind it all. What Margaret did was inexcusable. But I didn't respond to any of them. I had no interest in being vindicated in their eyes. My silence was more powerful than any defense I could offer. I let them sit in their discomfort, while I reclaimed space in my life that I had offered too generously. That evening, as I prepared a simple dinner of pasta and salad, my buzzer rang. James stood at the door, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Can I come in? He asked. I stepped aside to let him enter. He immediately went to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water, drinking it in one long gulp. Mom's story is falling apart, he said, setting the glass down. She told everyone she was paying for Paris, that she'd arranged everything. No. Why didn't you tell me? About all the money you were spending, the arrangements you were making? I shrugged. I wanted to do something nice for Emma. It wasn't about getting credit. But still, $5,000, Liv. That's a lot of money. It is, I agreed. And now it's back in my account where it belongs. James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when he was stressed. Everyone's talking. Mom's embarrassed. Emma's friends are all taking your side. I'm not asking anyone to take sides. I know. That's what makes this worse. You're just silent. And it's louder than anything Mom could say to defend herself. He stepped closer, tentatively reaching for my hands. What do you want to do now? About the wedding? About everything? I looked at our intertwined fingers, at the engagement ring that suddenly felt heavier on my hand. I don't know, James. I really don't. Later that night, after James had gone home to his own apartment, a decision we'd both silently agreed was best for now, I scrolled through social media. Emma had posted a teary-eyed selfie with a long caption about family misunderstandings and hoping to make things right. It had dozens of sympathetic comments, but also a few pointed ones asking why she hadn't known what her mother was doing. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. You should see the bridesmaids' private chat. Everyone's freaking out about having to cancel their Paris plans, but they're all on your side. Rebecca just called your mother-in-law a manipulative witch. I smiled despite myself. There was something darkly satisfying about the truth finally coming to light. Not because I wanted revenge, but because living in truth felt cleaner than living in the shadow of Margaret's manipulations. The next morning, I woke to find an email from Margaret in my inbox. The subject line read, "A sincere apology." I hovered over it, tempted to delete it unread, but curiosity won out. Dear Olivia, it began, I'm writing to express my deepest regrets for my behavior. My words were unconscionable and do not reflect how valued you are in our family. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive an old woman's foolishness and still attend Emma's wedding. With sincere apologies, Margaret. No mention of the Paris trip, no acknowledgement of taking credit for my generosity, no real ownership of the damage she'd caused. Just a carefully worded non-apology designed to make the problem, me, in her eyes, go away quietly. I closed the email without responding and got ready for work. My phone continued to buzz throughout the day, but I felt a strange sense of peace in not immediately answering. For once, I wasn't rushing to smooth things over or make everyone else comfortable at my own expense. The truth had a way of revealing itself without my help. With the Paris trip canceled and several vendors pulling out after learning of the situation, the wedding plans started to fall apart. I heard through Claire that the French photographer I'd booked, a friend of mine from art school who had given me a generous discount, had declined to work with them after learning what happened. The custom welcome bags I'd designed, filled with French delicacies and personalized items for each guest, would never be assembled. The vintage champagne toast at the Eiffel Tower, timed perfectly for sunset, was now just a Pinterest dream. The bride's stress turned into breakdowns. Emma called me twice more, leaving voicemails that grew increasingly desperate. Olivia, please. Everything's falling apart. I don't know what to do. I can't even look at Mom right now. Call me back. Her relationship with Margaret fractured over the lies and manipulation. James told me they'd had a screaming match at Sunday dinner, with Emma accusing her mother of ruining her wedding and her closest friendship in one fell swoop. She threw her napkin at Mom and stormed out, James said during our coffee meetup at Thinking Cup on Newberry Street. Dad just sat there looking miserable. Christopher tried to calm everyone down, but Mom kept saying she'd done it for Emma's own good. What does that even mean? I asked, stirring my latte absently. According to Mom, she was protecting Emma from... He hesitated. From me? From depending too much on someone who isn't family yet. He made air quotes around the words. It's ridiculous. You've been more family to Emma than Mom has been lately. I watched him across the table, this man I'd agreed to marry, who still struggled to fully stand up to his mother. And what did you say during all this? He had the grace to look ashamed. I told her she was wrong, that what she did was inexcusable. But, nothing. I said she needed to make this right. He reached for my hand. I've been staying at Christopher's place. I can't be in that house right now." I squeezed his hand, feeling a small thaw in my heart. At least he was trying. I watched it all from a distance, no longer emotionally tied to their outcomes. My days returned to a rhythm I'd almost forgotten. Work, friends who weren't connected to the wedding, evenings spent on my balcony with a glass of wine, and a good book. I'd started a watercolor class at the MFA on Wednesday nights, something I'd wanted to do for months, but never had time for between wedding planning and appeasing Margaret. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Margaret on Tuesday, 5 on Wednesday. By Thursday, she'd started calling from different numbers, thinking I was screening her calls. Which, to be fair, I was. The mother-in-law called again, then again, then again. Eventually, she left a voicemail filled with desperation, not pride. Gone was the Boston Brahmin composure, the carefully modulated tone of someone who always knew best. "Olivia, please call me back. I know I've made a terrible mistake. Emma won't speak to me. James is staying with Christopher. The wedding is falling apart, and it's all my fault." Her voice broke. "I never should have said those things to you. I was jealous of your relationship with Emma, of how she turns to you instead of me. Please, can we talk?" She begged me to reconsider helping. Said she'd been misunderstood, that she'd spoken in haste, that I was still family. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her arrogance had cost her daughter the dream she wanted, and I hadn't lifted a finger in revenge. I'd just stopped giving. I didn't call her back. On Friday evening, I came home to find Emma sitting on the floor outside my apartment door, her back against the wall, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when she heard my footsteps. "I've been waiting for an hour," she said, standing up and brushing off her jeans. "I didn't want to miss you." "You could have called," I replied, unlocking my door. "Would you have answered?" I considered this as I let her inside. Probably not. She followed me into the kitchen, watching as I set down my groceries and began unpacking them. "I broke up with Christopher," she said suddenly. My hands stilled on a carton of eggs. "What? Why?" He took Mom's side, said I was overreacting, that families have disagreements all the time, and I shouldn't throw away all Mom's hard work on the wedding because of one mistake. Her voice was bitter. Apparently uninviting my future sister-in-law and lying to everyone is just one mistake. "Emma, I'm sorry, but you shouldn't end your engagement because of me. It's not because of you. It's because I finally saw clearly who my fiancé is. Someone who will always prioritize keeping the peace over standing up for what's right." She gave a humorless laugh. Funny how one phone call could unravel my whole life. I handed her a glass of water, unsure what to say. She took it with a grateful nod. "The wedding's officially postponed," she continued. "I called the venue yesterday, lost the deposit, but at this point, I don't care. I can't go through with it feeling like this." "I never wanted this," I said softly. "I just couldn't keep pretending everything was fine." "I know, and I don't blame you, not one bit." She set the glass down and looked at me directly. "I've been thinking a lot about Paris." "Emma." "No, let me finish. You did all that for me. Spent all that money, all that time planning. And I never even properly thanked you because I didn't know." Her eyes filled with tears. "Why did you do it? Why go to all that trouble?" I thought about it, really thought about it for the first time. Because I love the idea of having a sister. Because planning things for people I care about makes me happy. Because I wanted to be part of your joy. And instead we hurt you. She wiped at her eyes. "Can I ask you something crazy?" "Sure." Will you still go to Paris with me? Not for a bachelorette party. Just the two of us. As friends, as sisters. She rushed on before I could answer. I know it's asking a lot after everything, but I still want to see Paris, and there's no one I'd rather see it with than you. I stared at her, taken aback by the request. What about your mom? What about James? This isn't about them. It's about us. She reached for my hands. I'm not asking you to forgive Mom, or pretend nothing happened. I'm just asking for a chance to rebuild our friendship, on equal footing this time. The final message from Margaret came on a Sunday morning, as I was contemplating Emma's offer over my second cup of coffee. Please. She's crying every night. I shouldn't have said what I said. Can you forgive me? But forgiveness wasn't what I needed. What I needed was respect, and that had never once been offered. That evening, I met James for dinner at our favorite Italian place in the North End. The tiny restaurant was packed as usual, the scent of garlic and tomato sauce filling the air. We sat at a corner table, a candle flickering between us. Emma told me about Paris, said after we'd ordered. About asking you to go with just her. I haven't decided yet, I replied, tearing a piece of bread. I think you should go. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. I think both of you deserve it. What? About us, James? Where do we stand in all this? He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. I love you, Liv. That hasn't changed. But I think I need to figure out how to be a better partner to you, how to stand up for us better. He paused. And maybe you need some time to decide if I'm still the person you want to marry. I looked at this man I'd loved for 3 years. This kind, conflict-avoidant man, who was finally starting to find his voice. I think you might be right about that. The wedding chaos had exposed cracks in our relationship that had been there all along. Hairline fractures that might heal stronger, or might break apart completely. Only time would tell. Weeks passed. Spring bloomed fully into summer, the Boston Public Garden exploding with color, the swan boats gliding peacefully across the lagoon. I'd said yes to Paris with Emma, but we'd pushed it to September when the tourist crowds would thin and the weather would be gentler. The trip would be different from what I'd originally planned. No bachelorette party, no bridesmaid bonding, just 2 women exploring a beautiful city on their own terms. The wedding was officially postponed indefinitely. Emma and Christopher were in couples counseling, trying to determine if their relationship could survive the strain of family dynamics and their different approaches to conflict. Emma had moved into a small apartment in Cambridge, needing space, from both Christopher and her parents. James and I were in a similar holding pattern. We still saw each other several times a week, still ended most evenings with, I love you. But he continued staying at Christopher's place. The engagement wasn't off, but it wasn't quite on either. We existed in a liminal space, reassessing our relationship in light of everything that had happened. As for Margaret, she'd retreated from her usual social circuit. According to James, she'd stopped attending her weekly bridge games and charity committee meetings, claiming migraines. The public embarrassment of her lies being exposed had taken a toll on her carefully constructed image. I was working late one Thursday, finishing a branding project in my studio apartment, when my doorbell rang. Looking through the peephole, I was surprised to see Margaret standing there, looking smaller somehow, less imposing than I remembered. I hesitated before opening the door. Margaret. Olivia. She clutched her designer handbag nervously. May I come in? Just for a moment? I stepped aside to let her enter, curious despite myself. She looked around my apartment with new eyes, noting the framed photographs of James and me, the watercolor paintings I'd started creating, the comfortable if modest furniture. It's lovely, she said, and for once, there was no hidden barb in the compliment. Thank you. Would you like some tea? No, thank you. I won't stay long." She sat on the edge of my sofa, perched like a bird ready to take flight at the first sign of danger. "I've come to apologize. Properly this time." I sat, across from her, waiting. "What I did was unforgivable," she began. "Not just uninviting you from the wedding, but taking credit for your generosity, lying to Emma, turning people against you." She swallowed hard. "I've been a mother for 30 years, and a society wife for even longer. I thought I knew best about everything, especially my children's lives." "Why did you do it?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for weeks. "What did I ever do to make you dislike me so much?" Margaret looked down at her hands, her wedding ring catching the light. "You didn't do anything. That was the problem. You were perfect, kind, generous, accomplished. Emma adored you. James was besotted. You fit into their lives so seamlessly." She looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "And I felt replaced. I wasn't trying to replace you. I know that now. But I'm from a generation and a social circle where a mother's value is measured by how needed she is. And suddenly, Emma was calling you for advice instead of me, planning trips with you instead of me, telling you things she wouldn't tell me." Her voice caught. I was jealous, and I handled it terribly. The admission hung in the air between us, not an excuse, but an explanation at least. "I've lost so much because of my pride," she continued. "Emma barely speaks to me. James looks at me differently. My friends whisper behind my back about what I did. And worst of all, I hurt a young woman who did nothing but care about my children." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I am truly sorry, Olivia." I studied her face, looking for signs of the manipulation I'd come to expect. But all I saw was a woman humbled by her own mistakes, finally facing the consequences of her actions. "I appreciate your apology," I said carefully, "but it's going to take time. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight." "I understand," she nodded, wiping away the tear. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I recognize the harm I caused." As she stood to leave, she paused. "Emma told me about Paris in September. I think it's wonderful that you're still going." "We're looking forward to it," I replied, walking her to the door. "Would you—" She hesitated. "Would you consider letting me help with some of the expenses? Not to take over, just to contribute, as a small step toward making amends." I considered her offer. "Let me think about it." She nodded, understanding that even this small overture would need to be considered carefully. After she left, I stood at my window, watching as she walked to her car parked on the street below. Her shoulders were straighter now, as if unburdened by the apology she'd finally delivered. The following Sunday, I attended a small dinner at Emma's new apartment. James was there, as was Claire and a few other close friends. Christopher arrived, late, bringing flowers and an awkward energy to the gathering. He pulled me aside at one point, his voice low. "I owe you an apology too," he said. "I didn't stand up for you or for Emma when I should have. I was so focused on keeping the peace that I didn't see the harm being done." "Sounds familiar?" I replied with a glance toward James, who was helping Emma in the kitchen. Christopher nodded. "We've been talking a lot, James and I, about patterns we learned growing up, about how conflict avoidance isn't actually kindness when it allows people to be hurt." He looked at Emma, his expression softening. "I'm trying to be better. For her. For myself." The dinner wasn't perfect. Conversations sometimes stalled, old tensions occasionally surfaced. But there was something honest about it. Something real, that had been missing from all those picture-perfect family gatherings orchestrated by Margaret. Weeks passed. The wedding was downsized from a grand affair at the Boston Harbor Hotel to a smaller, more intimate ceremony planned for the following spring at a vineyard on the North Shore. The Paris fantasy never came to life as originally conceived, but a new plan took shape. A trip for Emma and me, focused on friendship rather than wedding festivities. I was invited again, this time by the bride herself, not her mother. And when the new save-the-date arrived, my name was listed as bridesperson rather than guest. Emma had decided to break tradition, having me stand beside her along with her bridesmaids. I agreed to attend, not out of guilt, but because I believed in mending what could be healed, not in repeating what had been broken. I walked into the planning meetings not as a guest hoping for approval, but as a woman who had reclaimed her worth, and everyone knew it. I didn't give another dollar toward the wedding expenses. I didn't need to. My presence was enough. And gradually, my relationship with James began to heal too. We had hard conversations we'd avoided for years, about boundaries with his family, about his tendency to keep the peace at any cost, about my need to be seen and valued. One evening in late August, as we sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the Boston skyline in gold and pink, James took my hand. "Move back in with me," he said simply. "I miss you." I looked at our intertwined fingers, at the engagement ring I'd continued to wear despite everything. "Are you sure we're ready?" "Think we're ready to try." He smiled. "On new terms, better terms." I thought about everything that had happened, how a single phone call had cascaded into a complete restructuring of our relationships, how painful truths had given way to authentic connections, how I had found my voice in the midst of chaos. "Okay," I said, squeezing his hand. "New terms, better terms." The woman who once needed to be accepted had finally accepted herself, and from that day forward, I never again allowed anyone to decide my value with a smile that disguised a blade. I learned that true family isn't about perfect appearances or social standing. It's about people who respect each other's boundaries, who apologize sincerely when they're wrong, who grow together through conflict rather than avoiding it. As Emma and I finally boarded our flight to Paris that September, a trip that looked nothing like the one I'd originally planned but felt infinitely more meaningful, I realized that the greatest gift of the whole ordeal wasn't the justice of seeing Margaret's manipulations exposed. It was the freedom I'd found in standing firm in my own worth, in learning that love shouldn't require constant sacrifice, and in discovering that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're given. Paris awaited, not as a backdrop for someone else's celebration, but as the setting for my own reclamation. And that was a journey worth taking.